To order for April 19th, 2018, and begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. May we have a roll call?
Croner.
Here.
Stanton.
Here.
Curran.
Here.
Engel.
Present.
Manny.
Here.
Gatto. Gray.
Here.
Augustiniak.
Present.
Shaw.
Here. Okay, we have a quorum. We're ready to proceed. Are there any communications from staff?
Not this time.
Okay, approval of the minutes of the April 5th, 2018 regular meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
I will second.
Okay, I have been made aware of one correction, and that would be that under the village officials and staff, Trustee Michael Glotz was in attendance at the April 5th, 2018 meeting, and I'd like the minutes to reflect that. I received a copy from Paula, so I'm assuming that that has already been added on there. From any of the rest of the commission, do we have any corrections or comments on the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the minutes from the April 5th, 2018 meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Minutes are approved. Thank you. The first item we have on our agenda this evening, and again, I apologize for starting a little bit late today. Wanted to make sure we had all our ducks in a row. I thank the public for showing up here in great numbers, as you did on April 5th when we had a rather marathon session. Appreciate it. For those of you who were here that evening or who tuned in for the replay, the public hearing from that evening went late, and we opted to continue the public hearing to this evening. So first item on here is to remove the public hearing from the table. Do I have a motion to remove the public hearing from the table?
So moved.
Moved. Commissioner Stanton, second.
Second.
Second, Commissioner Curran. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, excellent. So for this evening, this is a bit of a procedural thing. We've already had significant testimony, staff presentation, testimony from the petitioner as well as the public, and discourse from the commission. So we're not going to have any further discussion on this point. I believe we've kind of discussed it out. So I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Moved Commissioner
Second.
Augustiniak, second Commissioner Gray. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, public hearing is closed. Thank you very much. So with that, we're going to move to head towards a motion. Before we do, I would just like to state that I would like to, in our first motion, I'd like to consider the Plan Commission's role in this. I've had some discussions with the village attorney over the past week about how to frame the motion, and it's important, I think, that the Plan Commission express its role based on determining the suitability of unincorporated properties for annexation. That's something that's outlined in the village's municipal code. I discussed that with the village attorney. So with that, I would entertain a motion on that, if we have one.
I'm sorry, what were we looking for a motion for?
A motion regarding the suitability of this property for annexation.
Chairman, could I just ask a question? Did you want me to go over the additional comments that were presented in the staff report from last time? Everything kind of went real quickly here. I guess, you know, we had new information.
Yes.
Do we?
Yes.
Would the
So I didn't know. You
commissioners
kind of
like to
closed the
hear
hearing so quickly, I couldn't catch you.
Okay. I think that's fine. I definitely would not want to come up short on any of the information.
Should we reopen the public hearing? I have new information that was in your staff reports. And I went pretty fast.
Okay. All right, do I have a motion to read?
Is it the problem that's in there, maybe?
Discussion. This item, you can't make a motion on it.
A motion on, okay. Is it necessary to open the public hearing? Okay, yes, so on advice from council, we're not going to reopen the public hearing, but we will hear comments or additional information from staff in the updated staff report.
Okay, thank you. Since the last public hearing, staff was contacted by Mr. McHenry. He asked to come in and speak with us. Kimberly and I sat down with him. He wanted to discuss the signs. He knew it was a concern of some of the commissioners. So what I presented in your staff report is comments that he made to us that he'd be willing to change. As we've discussed before, per our code, all existing signs can continue to exist upon annexation. However, in light of the discussion that was happening through the public hearing and the workshops, he's agreed to the following. And just to follow, if you want to follow through on this, we talked about the C-store, where he's only allowed, one sign over the top. He was 3 signs over the limit. He's agreed to remove 2 of those signs, and you can kind of see what I've illustrated there. The no Cook County tax and the second Dunkin' Donuts sign. There was also 2 changeable copy signs on the C-store. One was on the east facade, one was on the north. He agreed to take down the one that's on the north. He's electing to keep the one that's on the east facade. On the car wash, there was no change because, well, not because, but it was out of conformance by 6 square feet. He's not agreed to make any changes there. On the north side of the car wash, it already conforms with code, so no change there. On the south side of the car wash, the size was okay, but there was 1 additional sign that said pet wash. He's agreed to take that down. On the car wash canopy, on the east side, it was 3.31 square feet over code. He's not willing to make any changes on that. On the car and wash canopy on the north and the south side, they conform currently to our code. On the car wash canopy, it already conforms with code, so no change on that. Then on the truck canopy that's behind the C-store, it is 2.33 square feet over our limit. Staff has had some discussion on whether that's considered a sign or directional because it says trucks over it. He's not willing to make any change over that. And then the 2 monument signs, if you recall, there's a car wash monument sign that is 10 inches too tall, and it has the manual changeable copy sign on, so he's leaving that as it exists today. And then the car wash, the gas and wash monument sign is 1 foot, 10 inches too tall. The size is okay, the changeable copy size is okay, it's actually less than what's allowed, and he's not doing any changes on that. The only thing we discussed with him, per our code, with any changeable copy sign that's allowed legally in the village, if a property elects to install an electronic message sign, we do then not allow them to have any temporary signage after that. The temporary signage is like what you see with banners and the flags and glowing people and so forth. So he's agreed to remove any temporary signage that's out there. There's like a no Cook County tax banner I noticed on the canopy. And so he's agreed to remove all that. So that's where signage stands. And then the other comment in our discussions with him that day, I mentioned that there was concerns about parking that came up, and I think we had gotten some information from one of the residents that disagreed with staff's analysis on parking. He has agreed to strike the 2 truck parking spaces, And he said as part of his negotiations with the village board and the annexation agreement, he would agree as part of that annexation agreement to have the parking situation monitored, and at any such time that parking is considered an issue, which in my mind, we certainly don't want parking to spill over into residential areas. And so if that parking became an issue, that he would build additional parking on site. He's identified that that might be located south of the existing retention area. That would be part of the annexation negotiation. And then I think one of the last issues that was discussed was property values. It was brought up at the meeting, why didn't staff, if you recall, our treasurer prepared the spreadsheet for comparison of the property values in that area in answer to the concern, does this impact the property values? And there was a question by one of the commissioners, why didn't this get extended to the rest of the village? And as I mentioned that night, you know, besides just the labor-intensive means to do that, that really the point of that whole spreadsheet was to show trends. And I did give you a letter, I'm not going to read it today, it's fairly extensive, but Brad Bittenhausen did sort of provide the same comments that I did, with the final statement being, based on the analysis presented, it appears that property values within the Tinley Trail subdivision, as well as the rest of Tinley Park, are not in retrograde. The calculation of the 2017 projected EAV for the remainder of Will County, or for Tinley Park as a whole, would not change the established trend line reflected on the spreadsheet. And I think those were the only new issues I addressed since the last public hearing, and then the only other things are the findings that were put in the staff report.
Paula? I think you also have here about agreeing to stripe the two trucks parking.
Yeah, I did say that.
Okay, yeah.
He stated he would be willing to stripe it, and I believe I placed that on the conditions in the motions.
Sure. There's a typo.
That's it,
It's
sir.
true.
Are there any questions from the commissioners on the additional information provided in the staff report this evening?
I've got one about the signs, if I may. Paula, you did remind the petitioner that it was a consensus of the board that we expected him to come in full compliance with our sign ordinance, current sign ordinance. You also reminded him that he was warned not once, not by one, but two former mayors and a trustee regarding the signs that were going up, that they were not in compliance based upon the plans that were submitted to Will County. My biggest issue is that these hardships he brought upon himself. He chose to ignore both the previous village board, the previous mayor, president, whatever the proper position is, I guess it is president, and this commission, and he still wants to negotiate. And I apologize, Mr. McHenry, I'm not looking, and I should be. And we told you at the very first hearing, the consensus of the board was that we expected and anticipated that you would come in full compliance with the current sign ordinance. Now, the last meeting at the public hearing, we did say, because of the expense, that the monument signs we'd probably look the other way on, leaving you an opening to say, okay, I'll get everything else, but not the monument signs. You still choose not to hear our message. And I find that disheartening and disingenuous that you really want to work with this town at this time, in my opinion. You're a good man. I know you do a lot of good for the community, but in this particular case, I just think that you've taken a position that is not a very good position from a business perspective, trying to get into this town.
If you're asking me if I mentioned that in our meeting, he obviously was at the meeting, but I fairly couldn't say it was a consensus of the board. I know that's your opinion, but I couldn't represent the entire commission in that matter.
No, I know. He's got the minutes. He could get the minutes from the website.
Well, he was here.
Yeah.
So you asked me, did I represent that the commission was requiring this? I can't do that.
I didn't say that we required it. It was a consensus of the commission that we expected, the expectation.
Yeah, I didn't know whether it was really a consensus or not.
Okay. I think we can move on from that point. Are there any other questions from the commissioners regarding the new information presented this evening in the staff report?
I don't want to beat a dead horse, but the changeable sign, which is prohibited, I know, once again, there's a changeable sign on the east side that, for whatever reason, is being held onto, and I'm assuming that's going to be allowed to change messages?
On the C-store,
Yes.
it's a manual changeable copy sign, so he's electing not to get rid of that. So he would be able to put letters in
Right.
there and change that, if that's the decision of the village board.
Okay.
Clear on that point?
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you. Okay, so with no additional information to be presented or discussed, I would ask the commissioners with respect to the findings of fact drafted by the staff, are there any questions or comments regarding the findings of fact as drafted by both staff and the petitioners? Is there thoughts on?
And just be clear, we have two sets. We have one for rezoning and one for special use. If you want to take them separately or together.
So that's what we'll be voting on tonight, those two?
Yes.
Yeah, there's findings for rezoning. There are findings, even though our code doesn't specifically identify them. I sort of gave you some suggestions.
Mm-hmm.
And then, as always with special uses, we have standards that we look at to assist in your findings and your decisions.
Okay. Given that we're likely to take up the question of rezoning and special use separately, again, I want to reiterate that prior to taking up either of those, I would like the commission to address the question of suitability of annexation. I'm interested to entertain a motion on this point from any of the commissioners. Commissioner Croner, did you?
Sure, separate of the motions, you wanted something about annexation?
So there's a draft motion that I put out there. And before we move on to the separate questions of rezoning and special use, I would like to entertain a motion on suitability for annexation.
Where's the draft motion?
Page 13 of 14.
Oh, okay.
There's a copy of it right here. I had requested a village attorney for it to be distributed to the Plan Commission. It was not. So I apologize for that not being distributed to the commission.
Well, I believe they requested
I-
you to.
That's okay.
Yeah.
It was not distributed. I can read it, I can present it, if any of the commissioners would like to discuss it, or we can move towards a motion.
Read it, please.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to read it so that everybody can hear what it
Absolutely.
is. Is that fair enough? I would like to make the motion that under 32.164B, powers and duties of the Village of Tinley Park's Municipal Code, the Plan Commission deemed the property located at 19240 Harlem Avenue unsuitable for annexation based on the following. A, the existing conditions and improvements do not conform to the village's ordinances and codes. B, the existing conditions and improvements cannot be made to conform without unreasonable investments by the owner or acceptance of significant nonconformities by the village. And C, the existing conditions and improvements are inconsistent with the vision, objectives, and goals stated in the village's comprehensive plan.
So we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Commissioner Manning. Okay, so
I have a
at
question.
this
I have a
point,
question.
I would entertain discussion from the commissioners. Looks like Commissioner Stanton would like to be recognized.
You mentioned where that came from. Where did this come from?
Where did it come from? I drafted it
When?
last week.
But we're seeing it right now for the first time?
I brought that to the village attorney's attention last week, and I asked for it to be distributed. It was not. But let me be clear here. Any commissioner can make a motion from the dais, off the cuff. Whether or not it's written in advance is kind of irrelevant. Am I correct there?
Well, I guess the point is that, was staff aware of this? Were you involved in
Today I
this at
was
all?
made aware of it, yes.
So let me be clear. There's been a motion. It's been seconded. Discussion and comments are restricted to the commission. Are there any comments on the motion?
I think we should have it written in front of us so we can clearly understand. I truly do not understand
Exactly.
the motion. Are you
Okay.
making a motion to deny it because it doesn't meet?
I can explain the motion. The motion references the municipal code, and it specifically speaks to whether or not the Plan Commission deems the property suitable for annexation. Is there a further explanation of that?
What Peter read said deems it not acceptable.
Yes. In this instance, because the motion has the rationale for deeming it unsuitable, that's why it's written in the negative. Ordinarily, our protocol is to write motions in the positive, in the affirmative. In this instance, because of the rationale for the motion, it simply could not be crafted that way. So the question at hand here, and I apologize for it not being distributed, the question at hand is the suitability of the property, just fundamentally, for annexation. It's an up or down. If you'd like to, I could pass this around if you'd like to read the rationale. It's a simple up or down.
So the question is, if you vote yes, you're saying it's suitable for annexation. If you vote no, you're saying it's not suitable.
I appreciate the question, and it's a very important distinction. In this instance, we're going against our ordinary protocol, and we're framing it in the negative. And the question is it unsuitable? Right? So I apologize for being a little confusing. It's based on the nature.
And I guess I'm sorry, but why are we doing it this way? Why are you making it more confusing than it doesn't need to be? And not just be straightforward?
Well, the reason
It's like-
for
it's
the
almost like we're
motion
trying
is
to
to address
hide
the
something.
fundamental
How about
question.
if I should read it in the positive?
Sure.
I'm sorry.
Can I'll tell you what, Chairman, can I read it in the positive?
Yeah.
Can I withdraw my motion?
Well, you would have
Once the
to.
motion's a second, you're right, you have to take action.
Okay.
So it's been seconded. He can't withdraw the motion. Okay. All right.
Can I amend it or no, since I put it up there?
No, I think the simplest thing would just be
Remove it.
to take an up or down vote. And I apologize that it's phrased in the negative and it's confusing. But the question at hand is the suitability of the property for annexation.
Chairman, might want to assist the commission in helping them understand? I'm just suggesting.
Once again, we're going to take this to a vote. Are there any questions to further explain it? Can we pass that down, perhaps?
Yeah, sorry.
I'm just wondering, maybe you might want to help them understand this by explaining, for example, the C. So which conditions are inconsistent with a comprehensive plan that might help them understand?
At this point, I'm calling for a vote here. Right? No.
And then I guess I would want to say, a clarification is, if you vote yes, you're opposing the annexation. If you vote no, you're supporting the annexation.
Correct.
That's,
We're speaking specifically to the suitability of the property itself for annexation. Okay? The motion
I just don't know why we're.
recommends that it's
Just-
unsuitable.
right, nothing dealing with all the other things, just, is the property suitable?
Property itself.
Okay.
So
Fundamental question.
that's the opposite of what he said. I think I'm still confused, because if you vote yes, it means you agree it's unsuitable. If you vote no,
If you vote
If
yes,
you vote no, you mean it's suitable.
you believe
if you
it's.
vote
This
yes,
is it's ridiculous.
the property, you're
It is.
voting that the property is unsuitable for annexation.
Right.
It's not straightforward.
Okay, you know what? At this point, the motion's been made.
I
It's
got
been
it.
seconded.
Doesn't mean it's good.
Do we need further clarification? Because I really do want everyone to understand what that is.
Absolutely. I would like further clarification, and everybody should be on the same page. You don't need to vote for something, yay or nay, if you don't understand all the parameters. You have A, B, C as the parameters. And as Paula mentioned, and that was with good reason, it references the comprehensive plan. Well, then that needs further explanation of what vision, what goals are, what is the comprehensive plan? And maybe I agree with one of them, but not the other two. So I think it is not something that I would feel comfortable being asked on the spot without looking at it, without disseminating it in the negative like that, all inclusive of 3 points. And I agree with Commissioner Coran, like, you need to be able to see that in front of you to make a valid decision. And clarity is paramount.
Okay, so I recognize that and I accept that. So once again, I worked with the village attorney, attempted to get this out not only in front of the commissioners, but in front of staff very early. Unfortunately, it didn't happen, and so this is where we're at. So we have a motion, and it's been seconded so that we can move forward with the rest of the draft motions. I would just call for a vote here. So once again, you can vote no, and this motion fails. Is that clear? All right, so I'm calling for a vote. In this instance, I'd call for a roll call.
I just don't understand why we're being rushed to vote on something when it's not clear with everybody in this room. I don't understand that.
You can vote it down and we can move forward.
I still don't. I don't understand that at all.
It's been seconded. I'm calling for a vote. Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Croner,
Bear with me, guys. Yes.
Stanton,
No.
Curran,
No.
Engel,
No.
Manny,
Yes.
Gray,
No.
Augustiniak,
Yes.
Shaw,
Yes.
it's 4-4.
Okay, 4-4, and I believe protocol says that the motion fails. Is that correct? Okay. Yep, motion fails. So I would now entertain any other motions on this regarding either the staff drafted motions or any other motions there might be.
I'll go ahead and make a motion, Chairman, just to get this to discussion. I'd like to make a motion to recommend that the village board grant the petitioner, Leonard McHenry, on behalf of Lenny's Food and Fuel, Harlem Avenue, LLC, property located at 19420 Harlem Avenue, a special use for a service station, and adopt findings of fact submitted by the applicant and findings of fact proposed by village staff and the Plan Commission at this meeting, consistent with the submitted plans with the following conditions. Convenience store east, remove 2 wall signs. Convenience store north, remove changeable copy sign. Car wash south, remove pet wash sign. Remove any and all temporary signs or banners in exchange.
I'm so sorry, Peter, just 1 minute. We don't place conditions on zoning. You can place these conditions.
I'm looking at a motion that staff put in front of me in
Right,
writing
motion
here.
number 1?
No, I'm on number 2.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought you were reading 1. I apologize.
So Commissioner Croner,
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's fine.
So just as a matter of trying to lay these things out in order, I do think it's more appropriate for us to address the map amendment one first, which would be,
It's the one I have up
as Paula
there.
mentioned,
It's on your screen.
would
if
not
that
have any
helps.
conditions on it.
It's
That's the one he just read, right?
It's the
No,
one
I
on the
was reading- I was
screen.
reading number 2.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm sorry,
I
I
don't
thought
know
you were
what-
reading the number 1.
Motion 2 is beyond the zoning.
Right, number 1 is the zoning, and then number 2 and 3 are the 2 special uses. So the first one was zoning. Sorry, Trustee Commissioner Croner.
So, Commissioner Croner, would you want to take up motion 1 there? Or anybody
Sure, I'll
else?
go ahead and put it out there. That's, or if we can just backtrack and rescind everything I said before. Make a motion to recommend that the village board grant the petitioner Lenny McHenry on behalf of Lenny's Food and Fuel Harlem Avenue LLC a rezoning of the property located at 19420 Harlem Avenue upon annexation to B3 and adopt findings of fact submitted by the applicant and findings of fact proposed by the village staff and plan commission at this meeting.
Second.
Motion, Commissioner Croner, second, Commissioner Curran. Okay, could we get a roll call vote on this one?
Can we discuss it?
I apologize. Yes, if you have something to say on this motion, please do.
I do have something to say about the motion. I said it a little bit earlier, I'm not going to beat everything up, but although I made the motion, I don't support the motion. I just feel that the petitioner has brought these hardships on himself, and he's looking to the town to help him out by overlooking these hardships. He's been given ample opportunity to cure these hardships that have been pointed out by this commission numerous times, and he has not fulfilled that desire to the fullest. I also think that if we were to pass this motion, that it would cause injury to the use and enjoyment of the homeowner's properties immediately adjacent to the property. This would especially be true if a 24-hour gambling license is approved by the board. I also believe that this would impede the normal and orderly development and improvement of the surrounding properties. Currently, there's offices, bank buildings, and local commercial all around this property, in addition to agriculture, for uses permitted in the district. I do not believe that adequate measures have been provided for ingress and egress for the diesel truck pumps off of 194th Street. In the last 2 meetings, I've circulated photos that I've taken myself, just showing the issues that are inherent in the engineering of those fuel pumps as they stand there. Both in the parking area there, you've got buses and trucks parking along the sides. You've got trucks parking in before the pump area, blocking the pump area. The striping is simply not going to help that and make that go away. In addition, because it gets clogged up on 194th Street, you've got trucks sitting out there waiting to turn in at times. And I'm not saying it's all the time, guys, not at all. But the fact that this diesel truck stop was engineered using residential streets and not the state or county roads, which are fortified in cement, Harlem Avenue, to handle the diesel trucks, whereas residential streets are not fortified. The asphalt that is put there is not the same as what's on Harlem Avenue. And I just have a real problem pushing trucks onto residential streets to provide ingress and egress. I just think, it's there. We can't do anything about that now. I understand that. But why take on the problem and potentially improve upon, increase the problem by allowing more trucks and a greater traffic area in that in the area? I'm not going to take issue with staff on the car parking, the automobile parking. I understand that. You can always put it on the acre that he's got over there to the south of the pond. But the trucks is a real issue, and I've got a problem with that. So I would urge you to vote against the motion for those reasons. I think we owe it to the residents. Yes, they bought a house. There was going to be a gas station there. Never in their wildest dreams did they think it would be a diesel gas station. If the plans that I read go through and everything happens that's supposed to happen at the village board meeting with granting a liquor license, I don't have a major problem with that, but I do have a problem with 24-hour gambling. And that's the next step. I mean, the petitioner has said the reason why he's trying to get into Tinley Park, or annex into Tinley Park, is to get those 2 points. So I would urge you to vote against the motion as written. Thank you.
Are there any other comments from the commissioners who would like to speak in favor or against this motion?
I would like to just, in clarification, as you stated, the issues with the trucks being there exists. Not annexing into Tinley Park, they can never be addressed by Tinley Park. And those problems can continue, but by annexing into Tinley Park, the police department can control those areas.
Well, Will County can control those areas now as well.
But they're not, is what you're saying.
Correct.
So I'm just saying is the problem with the trucks currently exists.
It does.
And
I'm thinking it's causing injury to the residents of that area. And I'm saying, why would we take on an issue that causes our residents
because then I
additional
think we
issues?
can address that issue.
How?
We can address the issue as it is now. If there's, I know they've talked about properly marking parking lanes. If there's issues that they're on the street, ticketing, whatever can be done. I just think that it's,
Sure.
you give both sides.
It's a good point.
That's all I'm
Sure.
saying.
No, it's a good point. The one thing I also, I talked about the signs too, and I'm beating a dead horse on that, but why would we want to take on a property that won't listen to what we're recommending to it either? I mean, I hear you, we want to take it on to control it, but we're trying to control it, and we're saying, listen, this is what we want you to do with the signs, and no one's listening.
So, Commissioner Croner,
Yeah. Go ahead.
Other commissioners haven't had a chance to speak if they wish to.
Absolutely.
Again, there's a motion, it's been seconded. Anyone who speak for it or opposed to it?
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to, echoing Commissioner Croner. By looking at the facts, there's been many opportunities, from the village going to Mr. McHenry and the team to see how we can make your special use conform to Tinley Park, having in mind that at one day possibly annexing, like we're here today. But I see from one of the letters from Mayor Seaman that it indicates that the London team did not want to annex at that time because they did not want to comply with the requirements of the village. And even just today, right now, looking at one of the motions saying that you want to keep your changeable sign, and it's like, if you want to annex here, to conform to the requirements of the village. Plain and simple. Because we have other businesses that want to come in, and we present these other codes, we have to follow them, and they do it. But to want to come into the village now when you want something from the village, in my opinion, if it was my business, I'd be like, what can I do? How high would I jump so I could become a Tinley Park, to be annexed? I would go out of my way to appease everybody so I can be part of it. What I feel, in my opinion, is the opposite. You're trying to well, I don't want, my monument signs. You were told way back when, and I think in 2012, like, hey, your signs, our signs are 10 feet tall. Yours is 10 feet 8 inches. You have to conform.
Thank you, Commissioner Manning. So if there are no other comments here, I would like to just make a clarification myself. Again, generally in agreement and support with what Commissioner Croner has put out there. However, I would like to make it clear when it comes down to vote, My vote on this particular one, and I apologize to everyone because this seems convoluted and crazy this evening, but I want to clarify that motion 1 is strictly about the zoning of the property itself, were it to be annexed. It's not about the special use permits. So this is by default, when a property is annexed into the village, it comes in annexed as residential R1. This is simply a question of whether to rezone it to B3. That's the question. Okay. So I want to explain that while I'm in agreement with Commissioner Croner with his statements here, my objection relates more to motions 2 and 3. So when we call this to a vote, I don't want anyone to be surprised about where I'm standing on that one. So can we move to a vote here, please? Can we get a voice, roll call vote, please.
Wait, so we're voting on motion 1?
Motion 1 only.
And that's the one that's on 13 to 14?
Yes.
Yes, and it's the one on the screen at the moment.
Because this separates 1 and 2.
Can you get this up there?
I could. No. There it goes.
Are we ready to go to vote here? Roll call vote, please.
Augustiniak,
Aye.
It's been seconded.
Gray,
Yes.
Manny,
No.
Engel,
Yes.
Curran,
Yes.
Stanton,
Yes.
Croner,
No.
Shaw.
Yes. Okay, motion carries. Motion 1 carries. Now, we have a second motion drafted here. Do we have anybody that would like to make this motion? Or a similar?
I would like to make a motion to recommend the village board grant the petitioner Leonard McHenry on behalf of Lenny's Food and Fuel Harlem Avenue LLC, property located at 19420 Harlem Avenue, a special use for a service station, and adopt findings of fact submitted by the applicant and findings of fact proposed by village staff and the Plan Commission at this meeting, consistent with the submitted plans with the following conditions. 1, bring the following signs into conformance with the village sign regulations. The sign name, A, C-Store East. The deficiency, 3 signs over the limit, 28 square feet over allowance, not counting 39.6 square feet of changeable copy. McHenry's proposal, remove 2 wall signs, the No Cook County taxes, and the second Duncan sign. C-Store North, size is okay, changeable copy sign is prohibited. McHenry's proposal is to agree to remove the changeable copy sign. Car Wash South, the deficiency is the size is okay and 1 additional sign. And McHenry's proposal is agreed. He agrees to remove the pet wash sign. C, remove any temporary signs or banners in exchange for keeping the manual changeable copy sign on the convenience store and the car wash monument sign.
He did agree to do that. I'm sorry, it's an error.
Oh, yeah, it's not on there. Okay, so he agrees to do that. And number 2, stripe the truck parking spaces.
So we have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Commissioner Stanton. Any discussion on this motion?
Yeah, I'd like to clarify, too, my stance on that. Mr. McHenry, this is one thing, the signs, that is a bone of contention with me, because as Commissioner Manny mentioned and some other commissioners previously, this was a known entity many, many years ago from previous mayors and trustees. And if I were to invite you into my house and I said, come on in, but hey, we take off our shoes in my house, and you say, well, that's okay, I don't take my shoes off in my house, and you come in anyway, I would look upon that unfavorably. You were forewarned. And so, again, the manual changeable signs are prohibited. Your establishment is fairly new. I don't think that exceptions should be made. We spent considerable time on this code. There's other people who've been in Tinley Park much, much longer than yourself that have to conform to those codes. And that's all I'll say about that.
Thank you. Any other comments for or against from any of the commissioners? Hearing none, I'll move to a roll call vote, please.
Croner,
Number 2.
No.
Stanton,
Yes.
Curran,
Yes.
Engel,
Yes.
Manny,
No.
Gray,
No.
Augustiniak,
No.
Shaw.
No. Okay, motion fails. So, moving on to motion number 3 for special use on the car wash. I'm entertaining a motion on this item.
Commissioner Stanton, would like to make a motion, number 3, make a motion to recommend that the village board grant the petitioner Leonard McHenry on behalf of Lenny's Food and Fuel on Harlem Avenue, or Food and Fuel on Harlem Avenue LLC property located at 19220 Harlem Avenue, a special use for a car wash, and adopt the findings of fact submitted by the applicant and the findings of fact proposed by the village staff and the plan commission at this meeting consistent with the submitted plans.
I might make a suggestion. I would, if so desire, all these conditions that were recommended for motion 2, you might want to place them on this special use as well.
Okay.
I think that that's a fair suggestion. Are you agreeable to that?
Yes.
Commissioner Stanton?
And then I would just recommend, because there's a, maybe just mention what Mr. McHenry's proposal was, and under C, just note that that is actually Mr. McHenry's proposal.
Okay.
So without having Commissioner Stanton read that entire table from the rest of the commissions, are there any, is there understanding among the commissioners as to what the motion is? Accepting that table as written?
And number 2, the striping.
From number 2. So, we're good? All right, any
Just a-
discussions for or against that? You have a question, Commissioner Curran?
I thought I heard when you read the address that you read 19220 instead of 19420. So I just wanted to
Well,
clarify
I did read that, and that's what it says.
194.20.
Is that what I said?
I
194.20.
don't think that's what you said. That's why I just
Sorry.
want to clarify
Good
that.
point.
Is that
Okay, so, thank you. With, assuming correction on that point, 19420, that's the motion, and it's been seconded?
No.
No.
I'll second.
Thank you. Do we have a second on this motion?
Yes.
Yes,
Second.
Commissioner Kern. Okay, now, do we have any commissioners who'd like to speak in favor or against this particular motion?
And just again, just want to reiterate, you're coming to our village, I would like you to conform to our sign requirements in full.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Manny. Could we get a roll call vote, please?
Augustiniak,
No.
Gray,
No.
Manny,
No.
Engel,
Yes.
Curran,
Yes.
Stanton,
Yes.
Croner,
No.
Shaw.
No. Motion 3 fails. Okay, so, do we have any other motions with respect to this matter? Okay, hearing none. That concludes item number 1 for our agenda this evening. Motion number 1, just to recap. Motion number 1 has passed. Motions 2 and 3 have failed, and this matter will go before the village board.
It will be on the village board agenda on May 1st.
On May 1st. Thank you very much. while they're clearing out, I'd like to move us on to item number 2, which is a workshop on the Tesla supercharging station at 7204 West 191st Street. This is site plan approval and special use permit with exceptions. This is a workshop this evening, and we will move directly to the staff report.
Before we do that, can I ask a question? Where's the guys from Tesla? We were nice to them, okay? I'm gonna let you guys know that. We were real nice to them, so you're in for a hard one, so.
So,
Good, okay.
prepared?
Thank you. So before us is a workshop. So Tesla has approached the village in considering a site to construct a new supercharging station. And that petitioner is Black and Veatch, who represents, on behalf of Tesla, the site plans that are before you. And the Brookside Marketplace, of which this supercharging station is proposed, is a planned unit development. And therefore, after reviewing the planned unit development, it was determined by staff that this is a deviation, a major deviation from reducing the open space with their proposed equipment for the supercharging station, which is reasoned for them to have to request an amendment to the PUD and the special use. The equipment in the supercharging station is looking to incorporate 10 charging stations with 5 supercharger cabinets, 1 utility transformer, 5 auto transformers, 2 pedestrian light poles, and 1 switchgear assembly. Go to the next slide. This is the shopping center in its entirety. Brookside Marketplace, when it was annexed and the planned unit development was approved in the highlighted area, as what was known as Lot 6 when the property was being annexed in and approved for a PUD. It was mentioned in the planned unit development that this area wasn't finally approved and that they would come in on their own separate approvals when that area developed. This Lot 6 was permitted per the annexation agreement to have up to 8 buildings on this lot, and there are currently 8 buildings existing, so therefore no additional buildings could be constructed unless they came back for an amendment in front of this board and approved by the village board. In addition, it should be noted that the entire planning development was granted a parking exception of about 795 parking spaces to serve all of the uses proposed. And the ordinance at the time required approximately 4,094 spaces. The entire center today has 3,300 built. Here is the proposed location. It's off of 191st, right? Yes, excuse me, and Marketplace Drive. This is one of the main entrances into the shopping center. And the zoning in that area is B3. And the special use was granted for the PUD, and the abutting properties are vacant currently. It does abut a vacant property zoned ORI. To the west, formerly known as Greystone Golf Course, is the ORI, excuse me. Directly south is vacant land, which is zoned A-1S agricultural in Will County, and R1 single family zoning district in the village of Tinley Park. The southwest corner of Harlem and 191st Street is zoned B3 with an approved commercial development. However, the project has not moved forward. At this time, the Brookside Market Shopping Place Center is the only developed parcel at this immediate intersection. And vacant properties on the east side of Harlem Avenue and south of the I-8 interchange are within the Rich Township Entertainment and Tourism Overlay District. And this overlay district is intended to support entertainment, shopping, dining, hotel, convention centers, and a concert venue oriented as entertainment and tourism. Here is what the proposed use would look like in the real world. This is the Bolingbrook Meyer grocery store. This is basically the very same product that is being presented today in a parking lot, to give you a sense of how it's looks today. In your packet, I did provide you the Country Club Hills location, which is closer to us, also in a large shopping center. A little different landscape, a little bit a different site plan, but it is all the equipment and the stations are similar. So that's to give you a sense of, if you've had an opportunity or you'd like to, you can go visit those two locations. Kind of put things in perspective. So the site plan, to the left, you'll see what the existing conditions today. As I'd mentioned, it is within the parking lot of the shopping center, specifically Panera Bread's parking lot is where they're looking to locate. And you'll see they have what it looks like today and what they're proposing with their photographic simulation of how those Tesla charging stations will look when incorporated within the parking lot. The site plan proposes that they would utilize existing parking stalls. The plan calls for 9 back-in stalls and 1 pull-in stall for a total of 10 charging stations using 10 parking stalls. There are 11 stalls in that particular row, but the stall closest to the equipment is not a charge stall and therefore is not counted. The supercharging parking area is approximately 200 feet away from the back of Panera Bread building. And as I mentioned, there is substantial equipment that is associated with this station, and staff has expressed concerns about the applicant's desire to be located at the main entry point into the shopping center. And this would give you a sense of quickly how those vehicles, and when I mentioned that there's 9 back-in stalls, this is how the vehicles back in and plug into the charging station. This is that equipment that is going to be proposed and needs to be addressed through screening, of which where staff is trying to work with the applicant and how to address that as much as possible. The equipment is quite large. The auto transformer is about 7 feet in height with a proposed 8-foot fence around it. And all of this equipment would be placed on a concrete base with an approximate total surface area of 266 square feet. Here is, again, what they're trying to simulate how it will look with the existing conditions and the proposed fencing that would be around this equipment that they've chosen to consolidate all in one area. They did submit revised landscaping plans in an attempt to address some of the concerns that staff had with the landscaping. That was given to me today, but I did provide it to show to you tonight that this is what they're adding to try to screen that large area with more shrubbery. So this is what they can speak to more of and how they're going to address that. This is, again, just to show you the existing vegetation, is the Brookside Marketplace's main entryway, where you have mature vegetation, a nice stone wall that they're trying to kind of come in behind that. We tried to provide an exhibit to demonstrate the elevation change and the equipment. The roadway is slightly lower in elevation than the area of the parking lot, approximately 5 feet. So as you come into this area, look to your right, you will see this equipment elevated up. So that's where staff is trying to see if there's a better location that would not impede the main entrance and take away from the look that we've accomplished with this shopping center. So again, they gave me a revised landscaping plan in an effort to demonstrate how they can further screen this equipment. We can talk more about this. Staff has not done a thorough review, but this is what they're looking to propose. So again, with the concern of the location, we did want them to look at other locations that might be further away from the entrance but still provide what they're looking for their customers. And we'd like to understand more if other sites would be feasible for them and to address that with this board and staff. So these were some alternative locations we thought might be feasible. Here is a view that is a schematic that shows you how that would look from standing in the parking lot at the Tesla stations with the old landscaping plan. This is a site plan showing the area with the proposed landscaping. Here's the revised landscaping then, trying to incorporate more deciduous trees to screen the area. It's that same view. And this is another revised landscaping plan received today, incorporating some more of those evergreen trees. It appears that staff was looking for them to incorporate. The other item is signage. Each one of these Tesla charging stations will have the Tesla logo on top that I have seen that they will be fabricated as part of the equipment. And they also are proposed to be illuminated at night. The bottom left is additional signage that they're looking to post at each parking stall, essentially limiting the parking only to Tesla vehicles. They have two different types that they show. So I tried to show you an image I found online on how it would look illuminated at night, that Tesla logo on top of that charging station. The parking stall signs are not illuminated. So there would be 8 of those proposed non-illuminated parking signs with the Tesla logo on each. And staff did want to note, in driving in the parking lot, there is another electric charging station closest to the Kohl's. And in front of their parking, you'll see a generic sign in the photo. So that's an example of a sign that's been used. So if Plan Commission wants to keep the signage consistent with the other electric vehicle parking area, this could be an example we hold them to, so the shopping center is consistent. Otherwise, we're concerned with the additional signage of the logo of Tesla and how it impacts the overall aesthetics of the area and blending in with the shopping center. So there's an open item we'd like to further work with the applicant on. They did provide a photometric plan, and they want to propose 2 light poles, pedestrian light poles, naturally, to try to keep the area more well lit. However, because this is a PUD, the PUD limits them to comply with the existing light poles that are out there. Although they are a little more dated, however, we're looking to have us blend in and not stand out. So when I raised that concern, they said they would mimic whatever light poles are out there if we want to even add more light poles. But it does not appear that the photometric plan would, there would be any issues with the 2 additional light poles. So we just want to see that to be consistent. Going into parking, the existing parking on and around the property was constructed, as I had mentioned. It is a shared parking lot, and as part of the PUD, there was some variances granted. The installation of the Tesla charging stations is not specifically called out in our code or how we address it, but we did want to note how the existing lot that they're going to occupy would be impacted. And the Panera Bread, they do have a total of 58 spaces, and therefore there would be a loss as far as the parking stall will still exist. However, it's going to be for a specific use. However, if there weren't any signage prohibiting it, technically, if there was a parking issue, someone could park there if they needed to. But the Panera Bread essentially is currently meeting its parking, and there's no lack of parking for that. Then those are just really the main items. The open items are, we're really pushing them to consider an alternative location, not as close to the main entrance, with the issues of the elevation, the size of the equipment we're trying to screen. It's a large area, so we'd like for them to comment more on that. They are trying to address the landscaping if they are choosing this as the only location feasible for them. Obviously, if other locations were worked out, we would work aggressively with incorporating the landscaping, possibly berming. Then the other issue is just the parking stall signs, talking more about the lighting and the illumination of the charging stations. We prefer that these not be Tesla logoed parking, either keep it consistent with the shopping center and the generic electric parking, or remove them in their entirety, because the charging stations already have the Tesla logo on them as well. And is it the additional light poles really necessary? If they are, they need to be consistent with the shopping center to blend in. So you should have a great amount of information as far as their site plans and their kind of company background, which they can speak more to. Because we are along I-80, it's been told to me this is why this location is being identified for their customers. And again, I'm seeing these happen in a couple of other larger shopping areas in town. The Country Club Hills is off of I-57. The Bolingbrook location is off of I-355. And here we are off of I-80. So with that, I can let the applicants speak more clearly on their requests and their the technical parts of their equipment that I can't speak as well to, but that is my report.
Okay, thank you. Please, thank you for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us, Kimberly. Thanks for the
from you.
thanks for the great overview of the project. My name is Jordan Ryan. I'm a project developer with Tesla. My job's to build our charging infrastructure all across the Midwest. So you have a lot of great information already in front of you, so I'm not going to try to repeat too much of that, but of course happy to take feedback. Our goal is to ultimately build a site that the village is happy with, that our customers have a great experience with. Those are kind of our two main goals here. So just to speak a little more kind of about an overview of Tesla, if you're not super familiar with the company or with our charging equipment, we build fully electric vehicles based in California, build all of our cars in the US. We're by far the largest manufacturer of electric vehicles in the country and world now. We build what we call supercharger stations to initially allow our customers to travel cross-country. As you can imagine, when you're considering driving a fully electric car, even if you really love the vehicle, you're unlikely to actually purchase one or even consider a purchase if you don't feel like you can go where you need to go. So our solution is to build these superchargers. They recharge your car in about 30 minutes on average. And like Kimberly said, we typically place them right off of freeways where there's easy access, convenient amenities where our customers will feel safe, pulling in for about 30 minutes, leaving their car while it charges, typically grabbing a bite to eat, grabbing some coffee, things like that. What's interesting, what's a little newer that not as many people know about, we're still expanding our long distance routes, that we would call them. We're also trying to get more into urban areas. One of the most exciting things that's happening with Tesla right now is we are currently building our more affordable car that's called the Model 3. That car starts at $35,000 and has over 500,000 people on the waiting list to receive theirs. So we're now producing those. They're on the roads in Illinois and across the country already, and we're building more and more every day. Because of that, we are trying to build more charging options for customers who may not be able to plug in at home. So that's one other kind of important thing to keep in the back of your head. One of the most convenient things about owning a fully electric car, whether it's a Tesla or otherwise, is that you plug it in at home most of the time. If you have an attached garage, it's really quite easy to plug right into a regular wall outlet, or most people choose to put in what's closer to like a washer dryer plug, a 240 service, and then that'll fully charge you overnight. But we have lots of customers now who love the car. They're excited to order theirs, but because they live in a multi-unit dwelling or they may not be able to get power in their garage, they're having to find another way to charge their vehicle. So certainly this will serve people who are going to pull off the freeway and come in. We also are strategically placing supercharger stations all across Chicago now to enable ownership for people who otherwise would not be able to charge at home and otherwise probably would not choose to drive a zero-emission electric vehicle. So that's just a little extra context. Like I said, we're still in the development process for this site. We understand that it's in a prominent area. We'd like to do everything we can address those concerns, and I can speak to some more of the specific points that have been brought up by the planners. So before I jump into that, is there any questions I could address right off the bat?
Are these fully self-service, so there won't be any attendant, there won't be anyone, any staff or employees there to?
Correct, yes sir, yep. So they're fully self-sufficient, I guess you could say. You pull in, you plug in. There's actually not even a point-of-sale terminal. If there is any charge for plugging in, then you are, it all takes care of it behind the scenes basically. So there's no need for an attendant.
And these are strictly for Tesla vehicles?
Correct, yes sir.
Are there any security cameras that?
There can be. We work with our individual site hosts. In this case, DDR is the property owner. Mm-hmm. If that's something that the commission thinks would be necessary, we're happy to consider that.
Good.
To that point, I wanted to thank you for that comment. Actually, in staff, we were talking about if this was to move forward at its current location, we would want to work with you guys in possibly getting a camera at the intersection of 191st Marketplace and Market, just to add for our ability for security, safety, and accidents that may happen at that intersection.
Especially if someone is going to sit there for 30 minutes.
Right.
Sure.
And they may be playing on their phone or eating a box lunch in their vehicle while it charges. The idea that it was in a secured setting might be a good idea.
Absolutely. And in general, we try to choose areas that are well lit and trafficked. You know, we don't want to put our drivers off in the corner where they don't feel safe. That also, you know, that brings us to the point that is a well-trafficked area. But I'd like to address a little bit, the staff recommended a few alternate locations. We're really diligent in choosing our locations, and we try to please as many of the stakeholders as possible. The biggest sign-off we have to get is, of course, the property owner. So we evaluated specifically option 2 and 3 very early in our process, and actually that was our original preference. The landowner, DDR, was not willing to grant us use of those spaces, which is understandable. Again, we like to be within walking distance of amenities. Panera and TGI Fridays are there, both great examples of popular amenities for anybody, but especially our customers while they're traveling or charging. So they asked us to move a little further out, just to the left of what you see as number 2 on your screen, because those parking stalls are in general the least used in their experience owning the property. So it's still walkable, but they see very little traffic in that area, and so that is why we chose that area. And even though we'd prefer to be a little closer potentially, they basically said this is the only area near these amenities where we would be able to go.
Jordan, I have a question. You guys did an excellent job on the graphics to show what if, and I appreciate that. It gives a clear visual picture. I'm going to ask you for further clarification. I know it was presented that you're going to add more vegetation around that proposed 8-foot fence area, and I was wondering if the Brookside Manor entrance picture can be mocked up so that we could see a visual of that as well. It would make it really clear, because I think that was one of the concerns for those alternate locations, was that's the first thing people see when they come in. How will that look like head-on with the Brookside Marketplace entrance? How would that look? But would that be something you guys would be able to present to us sometime?
Yes, absolutely. So we can provide some more photographic simulations or renderings if you like. So we were actually at the site just before this meeting, kind of going back over. We've made lots of site visits in the last year or so, but we took additional photos. We can provide some photo simulations from a further back angle. I think these do a good job showing what it will look like as you're standing there, but less of a general overview. So we can happily provide that to the commission.
What I might suggest, we've done this with other projects, a SketchUp model that you can actually move through, because I think what's difficult, there is such a grade change, and that's what staff's concern's been. So if we could get a SketchUp model that would start at the intersection, like right when you come into the village, into the center, and so as you're driving by there, what are you seeing as you go by? I think that's what staff's concerns has been.
Yeah, and we're happy to provide. I don't know about the drive-by model, but we have some photos of that angle specifically that will hopefully give us a better
it's a fairly easy, it's a software. I would suspect your architect had. If he has this simulation, he can probably do that.
Okay.
And then you mentioned also the additional vegetation. Now, I'm assuming you mentioned evergreens. I'm assuming it's going to be even the bushes will be something that all year round looks at least lush, so that you don't have just raw tree branches in the wintertime. All of a sudden, that used to mask the fence in the spring and summer. Now all of a sudden it's barren, and the effect is lost of shrouding.
Correct. We're trying to keep that naturalized look as you see at the Brookside main sign now. We're trying to mimic that, expand it. A lot of it has that evergreen tree, which we were recommending to be installed at 8 feet in height. So, you know, you've got mature vegetation, we kind of want to blend it in. So, to your point, correct, yes, we are very strongly encouraging an all year round landscaping.
Yeah, that would be really good.
Jordan, what about staff's recommendation on keeping the signs consistent? Do you guys have an issue with that?
We don't have any issue doing that for the posted signs. We unfortunately don't have a lot of flexibility in the logo that's built into our charge
I
stall.
understand the charge, we're talking
Yeah.
more about the signs. You want to keep those consistent throughout the parking
Yeah,
lot.
it would be a consistent, more universal looking sign. We could remove our logo and have it be more consistent with that.
Okay, that'd be great.
That charging station that's on by Kohl's right there, that's not a Tesla station there, is it?
Correct. That's what would be a kind of general level 2 charging station. So that's kind of a 4 to 8 hour experience for one of our drivers potentially, which is not ideal. So these will be what's considered level 3 fast charger.
Is that station's not like under the scope of your work
No, that's
with the property owner?
existing station, not related to us. Yeah.
Do you have any stations that don't have illumination on the charging station itself with the Tesla logo, or is that?
Not for a project like this. For our level 2 product, again, if we were looking for somewhere where our customers were planning to spend 3, 4, 5 hours, then we would have a smaller charge post, but that's just not really within the scope of this project, that we wouldn't consider a site like this for those chargers. It actually can't. It's tied in. It's the illumination is. Sure. I will say the illumination is there to help customers find it. It's very much in line with lighting or even less lighting than any sort of signage for any of the buildings or any other nearby uses on the property. So it's not by any means glaring, especially if we're going to have non-Tesla signage. It's important, especially at night, just for wayfinding, to make sure customers find the site safely and easily. And the other consideration was that potentially not adding lighting or having to adjust the lighting plan. So we're open to removing lighting, and I think we prefer to add lighting again for the same reason, adds comfort and safety at night. But if it's the preference of the council or the staff to not have new lighting brought in, we would definitely want to have that lighting there to make sure our customers can easily find the station.
I think the question is, I understand you want wayfinding, but there's 9 separate units. Even if just one was illuminated, I mean, it's obvious that all other 9 are doing the same thing, so, but they're illuminated at night, so it's hard to look at this not under our definition of a sign. It's an advertising product.
Yeah, I guess we'll just have to consider more and get back to you.
Have we looked at any of the other locations to see how bright these are?
That's been on my to-do to go there at night. Every time I get home, I forget. So
I'm thinking.
I just have the image here.
I'm thinking if you just had one lit, would a person think the other ones are out of order?
Yeah.
That they're not working? And
Yeah.
I realize this is something new for us. It's not it's not addressed directly on point in any of our ordinances. That's exciting for you guys. I'm looking at it and I'm thinking the parallel of your just regular gasoline pump, and I think about every single one of them I go to, and not only is it illuminated with whatever gas station you're at, but I mean they have a TV there and they're constantly blaring something at you. For me personally, I'm looking at this and it seems rather understated. It's very it's not glaring at you.
Right.
For what that's worth.
Yeah. Our goal, we really care about how our sites look. We build beautiful cars and beautiful products in general. Like over the top or tacky is definitely not our style. It's kind of understated, I think, in general, is kind of Tesla's aesthetic. So the charging stations are very much in line. And I think the lights are just a very small part of that, mostly to help people find it. And I agree to your point, if they're not lit, that typically means they're not in service. Yeah.
And the maximum charging time is 30 minutes.
Yeah, so we build a few different sizes of batteries for a car without belaboring the point. The average charge time is about 30 minutes. If you were completely empty and needed to go to 100% full in our largest battery car, which goes about 330 miles on a charge, you'd be looking closer to an hour. So most people typically pull in a little before they're empty and don't stay all the way till they're full. They just fill up enough to get to their next spot. So that's typically about 30 minutes.
And you're expecting this as a 24/7 access?
It is, yes, sir. Yeah,
so someone who pulls off of 80 at 2 o'clock in the morning because they realize, I've probably got about 20 miles more on my charge, they'll be able to access this.
Yes, sir.
How does, during the elements, wintertime, snow, plowing around these?
Yeah, so all of the charge posts, and we do this intentionally, especially in the Midwest, are located behind the curb. So part of our agreement with DDR and really with all of our hosts is they continue to maintain the common area, the parking areas. So they're plowed along with their, and salted along with their regular maintenance.
Earlier you said in payment that it's behind the scenes, so you're not pulling out a credit card, it's all, when they use it, it goes to their car and it's charged somewhere else, so you don't have the worry of somebody
That's correct.
paying anything there.
Like an iPass.
Yeah, it really is.
Oh,
very,
okay.
It's very, very simple. Yeah, that's correct.
Issues regarding, thinking ahead of these charging things, electrical storms, is that an issue?
It certainly could be. So all of our stations are built up to electrical code, and if there's any issues, they fail safe. Basically, is the solution. So the car and the charging station actually have essentially a digital handshake every time you plug in. And if there's anything wrong with the car's onboard systems or the car detects anything wrong with the chargers, not only will it not connect and charge, we actually get notified at our headquarters and can schedule a maintenance visit to see what's going on. So we really, as you can imagine, if you're driving a fully electric car, there's no gas backup. If you pull into one of our stations and it doesn't work like you'd expect, it's bad news. So we spend a lot of time, energy, and money making sure it's a great experience.
So I had two additional questions here, but I want to make sure everyone's... Any more questions down here, just to make sure everyone's good? So I wanted to echo the point. I know it's already been said, but especially because it's 24/7, the potential wherever it ends up being located for security cameras. And I'm certainly not an expert on reading the photometrics, so I'll defer on that to whomever, but I agree with your point about if it needs additional illumination, by all means, for security. It being clearly identified as a high-end area, it's probably going to attract folks who are going to be looking for high-end targets.
Yeah.
So it would be good. With respect to the location, and just this is a little more long-term in nature, but Tesla's long-term, I was trying to find it in your material there, but just long-term plans and what expansion potentially, here might be. You have this number of stations here, but I'm assuming you guys are hoping that you take over the world. So what would you envision in the near term, not 30 years from now? I mean, potentially, when would you hope to be coming back to us looking for more stations?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a little hard to forecast down to the specific station level right now, but we certainly, especially with the more affordable car hitting the road, we're seeing increased traffic. California is where those cars are rolled out first, so we're seeing a pretty large increase in the usage, which is really exciting. And they're already starting deliveries here in Chicago. We're proposing building 10 stations, and that's kind of the minimum that we look to build in a site like this, and I think within the next 5 to 10 years, it's very reasonable we'd be back looking for more spaces. Hard to say exactly. We're obviously, we've been building these stations for 5 years now. We're expanding a station in Normal, Illinois. I believe it's 6 stalls up to 8. So adding a few over there. So as we start to see congestion on the network in specific locations, we obviously continue to build at other locations nearby. We certainly do come back and upgrade existing stations.
Okay, good. It certainly looks like you have room for expansion.
Yeah, we hope so.
Anyway, and the last question is just really for my own information. It's not really related to the workshop, but you mentioned people coming up short and being on their last 20 miles, and they pull up, and if it's out of service, I'm just curious, do you guys have like a fleet of emergency vehicles that run around with a battery and a quick charge? Because it's not like you can get a gallon can and put gas in.
It's a very good point.
For my own information.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a great question. We get it all the time. We don't have our own fleet. AAA actually is testing some of that exact service, basically a DC fast charging mobile truck generator with a charger attached to it.
Just enough to get you 20 miles.
Yeah, I don't know if those are in service in Chicago yet. There are public charging stations. So, for example, say if we have by far the highest uptime of public chargers out there. Again, we're monitoring constantly. Have a dedicated maintenance staff who repairs and replaces as needed. But if for whatever reason they're out of service, any 110 outlet, the car has a connector in it that you could plug in an emergency situation. And then worst comes to worst, people run out of gas all the time. People have run out of electricity in a Tesla before. We have a 24/7 roadside assistance team that you just call the number and they'll come and get you to the next charging station.
Okay. Won't charge you extra for letting you have the commercial.
That's right.
That's all the questions I have. Anything additional from staff or the commission?
I did actually, if I could, thank you for your clarification that you guys did consider some of the other locations. Was there any further discussion on option 1? Was that ever considered from your team, or are you looking into it now to get back to us?
We're happy to discuss it. There's kind of 2 things to consider. One, in working with DDR, they're great about communicating with us with preferences. They basically steered us to that particular spot and said, this is your best chance to build on this property. We can discuss number 1 with DDR again. What I would say is that the most likely feedback we'll get is that's a vacant restaurant right there that they're, I would guess, currently trying to lease to a new tenant. Being in that area, it's very likely that's, even if it's not written as restricted parking or attached to that unit, they may view that as the parking that would ultimately end up serving that restaurant. It means that our parking stalls would be more likely to get parked in with a regular gas car, which is an issue for a charging station. And then secondarily, I don't think DDR would even allow it because potential tenants would view that as they'd view that as their parking and losing some control of it. So again, that's why we've chosen to be as far away as possible in using those 10 stalls that are all the way on the perimeter of the property.
And as you said, that lot is built out, right? So all those parking spaces immediately in front there, it's unlikely there's going to be another outbuilding there.
Correct, unless someone petitioned the board. But.
Yeah. And just one other thing I'll mention about potentially adjusting the location. Again, our goal is to build a site that everybody in this council and our owners are excited about. We did get some earlier feedback last year when we were initially proposing the project, and I believe there were maybe some staff changes, and we got some initial positive indications about the stalls we're proposing, and that led us to actually engage ComEd. So we've already started working on a utility design, actually have an easement signed with the landlord to bring power to that specific area. So if we adjust now, it would most likely mean significant and probably costly delays to bringing the project to the town. We would love to continue pursuing this option if possible, adding as much landscaping, lighting, no lighting, to make sure it's comfortable for everybody.
All right, I think that concludes it here. Do you have enough direction to move forward on that, on the open items?
Just for point of clarification, if they want to do signs for the parking stalls, we would want to encourage them to use the same sign that's there. Otherwise, no sign at all for parking, limiting the parking.
Just one thing on signage, we're happy to do that. If we can propose a sign to you guys to look at, it'll be a universal looking sign with no Tesla branding.
Mm-hmm.
We just may have slightly different wording than the existing station, which has really strict wording about being only for electric vehicle parking, which we actually do not want for our stations.
You guys are open to that? So just to comment a little bit more on the equipment and where we're at, the proposed fence, and you might be able, it's a Trex wood treated.
It's fully composite.
Composite,
So
okay.
Trex is, I didn't know anything about Trex until fairly recently, but it's kind of the highest end composite wood, synthetic looking wood. So it doesn't rot or rust really over time. If you've ever looked to replace like a wooden deck outside, for example, that's typically your kind of higher end option. So we don't put Trex at every site, but we're doing it at more and more just because it wears better and looks better over time.
I think the Bolingbrook location, if I recall.
I think Bolingbrook may have Trex.
Had it. That's
I know
not
Country
this
Club
one.
Hills
It's
does
kind of
not.
far to see. I didn't get a close up, but that's, I think, the type.
Yeah.
And that's a lighter brown. You guys are proposing a darker brown. Didn't
Yeah.
know if you guys had any comments on the color or choosing that. We're trying to blend it in as much as possible with landscaping. The utility transformer, also that lovely green box cannot be modified. There was some comments back that it has something to do with fire rating and something like
Yeah.
that. So it has to stay that green.
Yeah.
It can't match the fence.
Right,
That's what we were trying to
it's
look
kind of that standard big green box you see outside of pretty much all buildings have a utility transformer. Once it's built, it's up to the property owner. I mean, painting can be an option. That we've checked around with a couple utilities and have had this discussion with other jurisdictions. Basically, because transformers tend to heat up, since they're electrical equipment, there really isn't a great weatherproof paint in other colors. These are basically electric plated more or less, so the green color is actually kind of part of the metal, whereas if you painted a different color over time, that's going to weather and chip and happens faster than average with the heat. So it ends up looking worse if you try to change the color, is essentially what we've been told.
I'm not familiar with either one of these sites, Country Club Hills or Bolingbrook, was it?
Yes.
Are both of those sites at the entrance of their centers?
Country Club Hills is close, it's viewable from the road. That one, the entrance is kind of dominated by a few restaurants, so there wouldn't really be space at their main entrance, so we're just in the parking lot that serves, it's kind of in the
The movie theater.
movie theater kind of towards the edge, but it is, I mean, I would argue that it's still in a relatively prominent area. You know, it's easy to find.
As prominent as what you're proposing here?
It's kind of hard to say. I mean, it's just as easy to find, I would say, for sure. There isn't a similar area on that property where we could have put charging
And what about
stations.
the Myers? What was the other one?
The Bolingbrook.
Bolingbrook.
It's in the Meyer.
Is that at the entrance to?
I'm actually not sure on Bolingbrook. Yeah.
To the shopping
Yeah,
center.
so it is. It's adjacent to.
To the promenade?
Right, but it's near the entrance to the Meyer.
Okay, so just to recap the open items here, for me anyway, the location that's proposed seems probably the most logical there. For me anyway, assuming that it can be adequately screened, which is the number 2 open item. And I agree with Commissioner Gray being able to kind of visualize these, especially from the vantage point of the entrance, would be useful there. But you know, otherwise, to me, it seems like a logical spot. The parking stall signs. I think the question on that was simply that having the Tesla branding on the signs, or having the signs at all.
Well, they're proposing signs for each stall with the Tesla red logo, and we prefer them not to be
Branded.
necessary because they have the Tesla charging station. But if it is desired by the board to have that, we want it to be more uniformal, kind of similar to the other one, identifying it as a.
Okay, so
I mean,
the question is, I'm just trying to make sure I understand.
Yeah.
The question is not whether or not to have a sign. The question is the branding of the sign, right? Because then it becomes an advertisement sign potentially, as opposed to a parking control sign.
right, and that's, 'cause our sign code doesn't really kind of address this, so we didn't know, is it an integral sign, is it directional signage? So, you know.
Yeah.
Well, that seems reasonable to me, and if the applicant's agreeable to that, that seems easy
Yeah.
enough. And again, I said about the light poles, I don't know if they're necessary or not. If they are for security purposes, I would definitely agree with that. And having them match the existing would be the logical thing.
We could request them to do a photometric of existing conditions. I think that might help, see how it meets our standards. I mean, we went out there at night and kind of looked at it, but, that's just a subjective opinion, so.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, that would be.
You could ask
Would that
them.
be required in this case from?
They
the
provided
department?
photometrics of what they're proposing, but I think if we're trying
I
to
see what you're
prove that
saying.
existing is inadequate, I would recommend that you request them to provide a photometric study of what's out there, and then you can decide whether you think that's inadequate or not.
Do we have any existing on file from when that was built, or would that not be?
I don't know,
Okay.
sometimes
Well,
the records are.
In any event, so it sounds like all 4 open items are being addressed. Are there still questions from staff on any of
I think the only thing, we threw up those three ideas of spaces. If you could go back to that.
You mean alternative locations?
Alternative locations. Other areas that Kimberly and I just talked about, there's certainly other areas on the site. They're not all controlled by DDR. I think DDR is this Lot 6, is it called?
It's actually, yes,
Yeah.
the original piece.
So, you know, you have other areas that are less utilized for parking, because we don't want to take away parking from our users. So, you know, those areas, if you think about back over by Best Buy, you know, to the north of Best Buy, you know, the electric charging stations that are over there by Kohl's now, you know, they're there. We certainly heard the argument, oh, well, you know, you want to put them where somebody can run in and get a sandwich, but, you know, the electric charging stations that are there now are not near a place to run in and get a sandwich. And I think they take longer than 30 minutes. So certainly understand them wanting to have a front door, you know, the front site to make it easier for the customers. And I just think we need to balance that between the overall aesthetics of because they may not be the only, eventually maybe there's going to be other electric charging stations, or they're going to come back and need 50 more or whatever. So I think we need to think about setting precedent, you know, make sure that it's something that we can accommodate everyone else fairly and consistently. And so that's my concern.
Yeah, I think it's going to happen faster than we think.
Pardon?
I think it's going to happen faster than we think.
I don't
actually
doubt. They're working on a model, I think he said that, where these stations will be able to charge other vehicles, not just Teslas.
I thought I had heard somewhere that BMW by 2024, their entire fleet's going to be all electric.
And so we have to kind of really think of this long term. I think, you know, everybody always does a very good job of trying to protect our aesthetic, and that's my concern. This isn't another use. This isn't, you know, a new Tesla dealership, which I know they don't have dealerships. This isn't, you know, you mentioned a gas station. This isn't a gas station that we're reaping property tax or sales tax from. So it is providing an amenity to our residents or people passing by. But an economic development engine, I'm not convinced that the cup of coffee or the extra Panera sandwich, in my mind, I would want to weigh that extra income that might happen if someone comes and does that against harming our aesthetics. That's all.
That seems fair. So can I confirm something I thought you said earlier? Sure. At least now you're looking to build 10 of these types of stations in the Chicagoland area, right?
At this specific site. So it's building 10 stalls. So there'll be up
stalls.
to 10 cars could be simultaneously charging.
How many of these type of locations? I know you mentioned the urban environments, but just in the suburban type environment, equivalent to like the Meyer, Country Club Hills, or this, about how many are there?
Yeah, so I believe we have 7 or 8 open now in Chicagoland area. All of exist like similar size or larger. We actually just opened a 20 stall station in Skokie.
Okay, so currently, how many do you have proposed or planned in the near term, 5 years?
I can't speak exactly to how many are in development, but we have more coming in all parts of the city. Yeah.
All right. So my point in that is just understanding the scarcity of it.
Yeah.
And so a Tesla driver or somebody else coming through the area, you know, what are their opportunities to charge up Tinley Park versus somewhere else? So, and what are they going to do? They might only get a sandwich, or you know, they may plan their trip around their stop.
Right.
So it's hard to say. So, do any of the other commissioners have thoughts or comments on location, pros, cons, indifference?
That would be helpful.
You know, honestly, I happen to agree with Paula on this. Looking down the road, there is no real opportunity to expand on that site, and I'm sure that you guys have plans to take over the world. He says it all the time, which is fine. God bless him, go for it. I just think that maybe elsewhere in the parking lot, maybe even over by that, I'm looking over, if you look at the slide that's on the screen up there, see where it says retention pond? And then see directly above that, that long list of parking places? You could berm that up real nice and
Where, maybe I put
right above the,
Sorry, I can't quite make it out.
yeah, sorry, my bad.
No, that's
Didn't
okay.
mark it.
Peter, are you talking about, like,
Right those spaces. I don't know how many spaces.
there's like a donation box
Savers.
there now.
Yeah, I can, so we actually have looked at that location too, a few years back when we were initially looking at our Chicago planning. It is in some regard, you know, it's still prominent in the center. The disadvantage of that location is the power. We have to, again, get a new transformer and bring power in, so it's a really long utility run and would disrupt that entrance pretty significantly during construction, where the existing one will have very minimal to no disruption from a utility standpoint.
So it's just more expensive for you?
More expensive, and I think people would be dissatisfied with what that area might look like during construction, where we're in terms of getting the actual power from the road. So the power is fed basically along 191st Street, and you'd have to tap into that and run power all the way up kind of through that drive aisle. The other disadvantage is that that location is, again, really close to some other areas that are kind of more prime parking, so to speak. And the final thing I'll say is that it's not the most common, you know, kind of amenity we look for our customers is easy walking distance in all weather to food. So if you pull in and it's 10 degrees out and you're parked there and you want to make it to the closest food option, you're walking all the way across that relatively large Target parking lot that doesn't really have any safe pedestrian ways unless you walk down across a couple intersections and get across. So,
So the concern becomes if you put those in the center of the center, people will need a parking space and go, the heck with Tesla, I'm just going to pull in there. You lose
and
your
we've
charging
seen that on other places where we end up in a closer spot. So we actively work with our property owners to, you know, find a spot where we still think is reasonably close to amenities, but isn't likely to be parked in even on a busier day. So we really do think that location is kind of the right balance for that.
So as far as people, you know, your plan was that you park or have it near restaurants and that, so I can hook my car up and go get something to eat. Timing doesn't matter. I mean, I can go and eat and drink and come back 6 hours later and let the car still sit there and be charging.
That's a great question. We actually don't encourage or allow that necessarily. So when you plug in your car, most people carry a smartphone these days, and your smartphone will actually keep you updated on the charging status of the car. And then once you're actually fully charged, it'll start pinging you to move your vehicle.
Gotcha.
Because again, congestion can be an issue at some of our sites. And yeah, and it actually and it actually, eventually you can be charged what we call basically an idle fee if you're taking up the charging resource that other people could be using and not actively using it.
Good.
Well, so to that point, from an economic development point, we're not encouraging people to be there very long to buy sandwiches and food. But I want to go back, I think Peter made a good point about that location, because actually it is not a heavily used area, and that's why the donation box is there. Because it's not a highly valued parking area, I guess.
This area?
But if I heard you correctly, Tesla
Farther.
knows its users, customer, or owners pretty well, and the concentration of food and restaurants are all on that southeast corner there, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that's-
There's no.
as opposed to the craft stores and sporting goods and all that.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So our strong preference is to remain on that part of the property. I'm not sure if we would be able to consider the suggested location, just in terms of,
So
creating a
the
compelling
equipment
site.
that you're going to put in with the 10 stalls initially,
I'm sorry. What was the first part of
the
question?
equipment that you're going to put in, the infrastructure, the main power, what is the expansion capacity that you have there, where you could just come in and add more without having to add a new transformer? Or is it you're putting in a transformer to service those 10 and it can't handle any more? Just looking at opportunity for easy expansion.
Sure.
Down in Normal, you said you added a couple more.
Yeah.
I would expect you probably didn't have to tear everything up and put in a new transformer for that.
I don't know if we had to upsize the transformer there. We typically try to, it depends a little bit on the site, but if we are really confident that we'll see congestion sooner than later, we can upsize some of our equipment right off the bat to allow for, closer to plug-and-play expansion. Obviously still requires a little construction down the road. For this particular site, and considering that we're trying to kind of minimize the equipment footprint already, since we're in that's part of the PUD is that we're in the equipment, or we're in the green space, which is why we're here. We're not necessarily planning to upsize the equipment because it already is relatively large, and it would just be larger if we did that now and wouldn't serve a purpose until an undefined expansion happened.
Maybe it would be helpful to have them provide us where they, if they do ever need to expand, where would they expand on this site?
Jordan, I have another question, because I've heard you mention the word congestion a couple times now. What is the protocol? Say it's Christmas time, 10 of those stalls are occupied. What's the protocol for the cars to that are next in line? Do they just kind of park in that drive space? Because if they park in a stall, somebody else could say, "No, I'm next."
Sure.
So how does that work?
Yeah, so the solution we're working with to try to make sure that just doesn't happen in the first place, the Tesla user interface actually will advise you on the status of individual charging stations in the area. So if you're on your way in and you see that the Country Club Hill station has 7 out of 8 stalls full, and that Tinley Park has 6 out of 10 full, the car will actually suggest the less occupied station, and you'll also be able just to see it. If you're not using the navigation system, it still shows occupancy. And so our goal is to build enough sites where obviously we don't want to overbuild, but even on those peak times, we're serving demand. So that's why, for example, we now have our first 20 stall site in Skokie. There's not always going to be 20 cars parked there charging, but during those busy times, there might be about that many. And then we're continuing to add locations all around the Chicagoland area to accommodate that kind of peak demand.
So is it like Spot Hero? Could you claim the spot
There's
if
no
you're 5
reservation
minutes away?
system.
Okay.
Yeah, not quite there yet.
Yikes.
Could you provide us with an exhibit next time of where you plan to expand?
We certainly could. We would have to, that's something that DDR would also have to sign off. It might be premature at this point to provide something like that. If we did expand, we would come back and go through the process again, most likely.
I guess I'm being somewhat facetious. If you go back to that plan, if they've already told you that they don't want you going to the right, then my concern is you're going to come back and want to do those spaces along Marketplace Drive. Which area more prominent?
Yeah, I think realistically, if we were going to expand, we probably could have expanded our Country Club Hill site. We're coming to Tinley Park because A, it serves another location, and B, we think it's a nicer amenity mix and a nicer location too. So I don't think we have, plans can change, but I don't think we have plans to expand this site in the immediate future.
But if you do expand, it doesn't make economic sense for you to say, okay, we're maxed out there, so we're gonna now go over to site 1 and do some more. Your infrastructure cost is already into this, so if you gotta expand, you're gonna have to expand in that area. And my concern is, especially with DDR, if they've already told you spots 2 and 3 are too valuable, my real concern is then the less likelihood is going to be those spaces that front right onto the drive.
In that case, we'll probably just go to a different property. If we don't have additional expansion potential for this property, we'd look to find somewhere else in Tinley Park if we need additional capacity.
Permission to approve it or not to approve it.
And at this point, it sounds like DDR wouldn't approve it anyway. So.
Right.
But they make good money on this. They're going to be very accommodating.
I have one question, Jordan. What side is that Tesla station at Country Club Hill? Is it on the east end or the west end?
I'm trying to think, doing my mental geography. It's basically, if you know where the movie theater is, it's towards the perimeter of that parking lot. I
pulled in about a month ago with my brother-in-law, and I remember hearing that there was a Tesla station. I kind of looked around. So you guys do a good job at blending in, or at least
just north of it.
Not that location. If you visit it, you'll see the big. The concern with that location is actually it's right next to another drive aisle. So when I was leaving, I kind of had to poke around. Big, 8 foot tall. But they're limited. You don't have the space that this location has.
Sure.
Once you see it, you'll know.
I'm gonna return at night just to see how it looks
There
at
you go.
night.
Yeah,
so.
please do. Yeah, in general, we.
I think he needs a Tesla to drive over there.
Yeah,
See
can do
how-
one we
see
would.
if they really charge that
Just
fast.
kidding.
Pile in afterwards, yeah.
All right. Do you guys have
It's an interesting experience.
a fair amount of guidance now for moving forward?
Old Brook.
All right.
Make it look like
Excellent.
they're in the
So-
lot there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks, everybody.
Drove around a little bit.
So the public
It's a
hearing
weird
has been
experience.
scheduled,
There's no
Yes.
and
acceleration.
May 3rd.
feel
May
or
3rd.
that. I mean, it
May
was-
3rd is next time we'll see you, and I'm
Drove
assuming
the
we'll be in touch with you.
sportiness model like I get.
Yeah, we'll be in touch with Paul in the meantime.
Thank you again, thanks for coming.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Everybody who hung around. All right, next agenda item here is item 3. It's another workshop. I believe this one, I'm hoping from
Thank
from
you.
the staff report seemed, thank you, seemed fairly straightforward.
Fairly straightforward, but very
This is
complicated.
a workshop, plat of subdivision, number of properties to work on.
I'm just
go
gonna make a
straight-
guess that you really enjoyed this.
I like looking at this, yeah.
This, I have never seen this situation, and of the 3 different engineering companies and the surveyors, they just scratched their head. They had never seen anything so messed up. So I don't know if you really care how it happened, except it happened. And we've been working on figuring out how to resolve this for quite some time, because the attic door had a sale pending, and there were no monuments that made sense, and they weren't consistent with the plats. And so, again, I think the diagram here is pretty clear that there was a gap between what should have been a coterminous line. So, I really want to, he's not here, he's kudos to Robinson Engineering, because Randall Gans, he just took this upon himself, and he really drilled down to the minutia and figured out how to do this. We had a meeting with all the property owners, gave some suggestions, there was a little bit negotiating back and forth. The village took the lead because it just never was going to be worked out individually, because everybody had their own self-interest.
Somebody had to be in
So I can explain more how it happened if you really care, but at the end of the day, we did come up with a plat that everybody's happy with. There was some money that had to exchange hands, because some lost frontage and some gained a little frontage. But you ended up with an ATM of the bank that was on somebody else's property. You had landscaping on somebody else's property. And I think we gave them all a fair solution. We still have some logistics in terms now, one of the title companies is wanting further verification on how this is going to be entitled, so the bank has actually stepped up and is willing to pay for that legal documentation. But the plat is good. The plat is good where it's at, and it's got full support by all the parties involved. And Attic Door would be able to move forward, possibly with the sale of the property. That's it.
Well done. Thank you.
Just on that graphic that was on page 2, I thought I...
This one?
Yes, I thought I understood it when I read the staff report, unless I just misunderstood what you said. I thought we had an issue with overlapping lines, but are you saying there was a...
No, it's really a gap.
There was a gap of
Yeah.
no man's land? Is that effectively what we're looking at?
Yes, I guess.
Okay.
And then that just kept being pushed down the block.
So that was that little strip of property?
No,
No?
no, it's the red line and the blue line should be on top of each other.
Oh.
But a surveyor, which I imagine if Randall could get his hands on him now, he'd probably shoot him.
Somebody pounded a stake in the wrong
So the
spot.
Stockman's original plat mathematically started there at the blue, and they should have started at the red. And so because they started in the wrong place, and this is all before things were being built and everything else. And then I'm told it's the laziness of subsequent surveyors. They just took it as true and never researched. And you talk about problems, when you get title insurance and you buy a piece of property and you're being told you've got 50 foot of frontage and now you only have 42, who's whose head's on the block if you bought that piece of property. So I really have to commend the property owners for working cooperatively, because this could have gotten tied up in court for a very long time. Were you involved in this too? Yeah,
I'm familiar with that, yeah.
yeah, it could have really been a mess. So I think everybody needs to be complimented for working cooperatively and getting it done.
Well, so this is a workshop.
No, I'm sorry, it's not. I'm looking for an approval of the plat. Usually plats take one meeting. We only usually take one meeting. So I'm looking for an approval of, and I think I have a motion.
Well, that's even better.
Yes. So that's the motion, and then I'm hoping it'll just take one meeting at the board as well.
So what I would say is that this seems like, although it sounds like it was a nightmare getting there, sitting right here, it seems like pretty cut and dried.
Yes.
Right? Any thoughts, comments on that, or can we just entertain a motion and move forward?
I'll be glad to put up a motion.
Sounds good to me.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to recommend that the village board grant approval for a plat of re-subdivision for the village and owner's re-subdivision for properties commonly known as 17424 to 17500 Oak Park Avenue with the PIN numbers 28-30-314-003-000 through PIN number 28-30-314-012-000 as depicted in Exhibit A.
Second.
Second, and I'm sorry, I didn't catch.
Chuck.
Stiniak. This doesn't require a roll call, does it? Just voice vote, or?
It should if you read.
Yeah, all right, doesn't hurt. So, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Croner,
Yes.
Stanton,
Yes.
Curran,
Yes.
Engel,
Yes.
Manny,
Yes.
Gray,
Yes.
Augustiniak,
Aye.
and Shaw.
Yes. Unanimous motion carries, and this will go to the village board soon.
On the first.
On the first. Okay. Last item, good in the order?
Yes, I have a couple of quick things. I know you all like to know what happens on the projects you work on. Langford went to village board, it got approved. We do have, our planner was appointed at the last meeting, so we are going to be bringing him on next Wednesday. We are so excited. I think I told you this, he's a native. He was born and raised here, so very cool. He worked for me in Homewood, so I can attest he's a very hardworking young man. And he knows Kimberly as well, so we're one big happy family. It's kind of nice, very nice. I want to remind, is there any of these that have not filed their ethics report yet?
I already spoke to them about it.
Okay, you've been,
Except for you.
the Clark Street Station on Oak Park Avenue that everybody's getting real tired of seeing, that's coming down. We had you should take some credit for this, so go ahead and talk about it.
We've had the demolition order for quite some time.
Yes.
The property owner thought that they had been foreclosed on, found out that the bank had relieved them of them, or had released the mortgage. They've agreed to comply with the demolition order. They've obtained the permits to both remove the underground storage tanks, and the top in the building.
The canopy.
The canopy. Talked to him actually this morning, and they anticipate that they'll be done with, I'm not certain with the entirety of removing the underground storage tanks, but the building and the canopies will be down by end of next week.
Excellent. And you've seen Schicks is down, so we're making some progress. And we're also, to that end, the mayor had initiated some economic development programs for Oak Park Avenue and the Legacy area. We're bringing that on the 24th Economic Development Committee next week. We have 5 incentive programs for businesses in the downtown. So we're excited about that. That'll go to the committee, and then it'll go on to the board from there. The program provides for facade improvements, code improvements, landscaping, recruiting retail businesses, and signage. And then Kimberly and I have been working on preparing some guidelines for architectural review of the facades
and for the signs. So that's kind of exciting. Plaza, just to give you an update on the plaza, we have a meeting at 8:30 tomorrow morning to look at the latest plans and hope to get that. I forget the date we're taking that. We're taking that to, I think it's going to Economic and Marketing on the 24th as well, yes. So you can watch that on TV and kind of see how those plans are working out. Our software, finally, we have our final interview on the 26th of April. So I know you're tired of hearing about it, aren't
Actually, you guys made a decision after you went to that one place.
I know, we got it down to 3, and then we got it down to 2, and you know, I hate to sound like that, but it is like the biggest thing I've been involved with in here, and it's really got to be right. And making the decision is huge, but implementing it is going to be scary, to me anyway. I mean, they need staff for like a week, and so I don't know how we're going to survive while we're trying to get it up to speed. I know a lot of you, especially you, Ken, like all these planning things. I thought you might be interested in this summit. It's a bike summit, May 7th in Chicago. You know, once we get fully staffed, we're really going to be able to get to some of those things that I know a lot of you have been wanting us to look at, some of the bigger master plans, the comprehensive plan, bike planning, and we've just not had the staff to do that. So once we do that, we're going to be able to start doing those long-range planning things that I think a lot of you have been interested in. So call me if you want. It's May 7th, and it's going to look at everything from bike sharing to bike trails to infrastructure and education on bike planning. So we'll have staff go into it, but I'd love to have commissioners involved in these kinds of planning exercises.
Paul, is that a Monday?
That's a Monday.
It is a Monday.
Okay.
It's a Monday in Chicago, and it's a full-day thing. It's 8:30 to 5. So these are usually very good. I mean, I went to one years ago, and they expect you to ride your bike to it, though. There's a lot of real enthusiasts, you know. And that's it. Thank you. And welcome, Barb. She just came back from Florida.
Yeah.
Arizona, I mean. I'm sorry. Arizona.
Thank you. Now, I receive comments from the public. I guess there actually are some public here. Anybody wish to speak? Okay, hearing none, I entertain a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Seconded by Commissioner Gray. Who moved that?
Chuck.
Commissioner Augustiniak, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.